Hi there, I'm Mabel. My sister called me to country to show up at her best friend's millionaire wedding. What she didn't know? I'm 10 times richer than every name on that guest list. But that night wasn't about money. It was about lies, hidden invitations, a stolen startup idea, and being erased from our mother's will like I never existed. They told the world I didn't belong. So, how did I end up stealing the spotlight at their perfect event? And why did my sister turn pale when the groom called me the reason he made it? The call came just before sunset. I was in my kitchen in Austin, swirling tea leaves in a mason jar. Something I did when I needed to think. The number was familiar but unexpected. Mrs. Ivy, our old neighbor from Lexington. "I found something in my mailbox," she said. "It's addressed to you. Cream-colored envelope. Looks fancy." She read the return address and my stomach turned. Travis Burkhead's firm, not Charlene, not Carla, Travis. That invite should have reached me weeks ago. Charlene must have intercepted it. I could hear her voice now. "Why would you even want to come? It's not your scene." I thanked Mrs. Ivy, booked a flight, and packed light. I landed in Charleston the next afternoon. Outside the airport, black SUVs waited for women in glittering heels. I took the shared shuttle. I wasn't there to make an entrance. I wore a pale linen dress, my grandmother's wrap boxed carefully on my lap, and well-worn flats. The driver didn't notice me. Neither did the other passengers. Bayview Orchid Hall glowed in the heat, columns draped in orchids, music drifting out. I walked toward the entrance, invitation in hand. Before I could speak, the concierge, Marcia, looked me over and said flatly, "Staff uses the back." "I'm a guest," I replied. She frowned and called over Janice, the planner. Janice checked the tablet and gave a tight smile. "Would you mind waiting outside a moment?" she said, "just to keep the line moving." I stepped aside. A few minutes later, Charlene arrived, heels clicking, voice sharp. "Well, well," she said. "Didn't expect you to drag that country life all the way here." Laughter. Carla wrinkled her nose at the box I held. "Is that homemade jam or something?" she snorted. One bridesmaid filmed it, another mocked my shoes. "Those souls are crying," she said. I didn't respond, just stared at Charlene. Her eyes held, but her jaw tightened. I turned and walked back outside. I wouldn't give them a scene. I sat near the fountain, the gift still on my lap. Through the open doors I heard toasts, glass clinking, more laughter. For a second I considered leaving, but I remembered why I came. Not for them, for me, for the version of me who used to stay quiet and walk away. Not tonight. The sky faded into that hazy space between peach and purple. Garden lights buzzed on, casting a soft artificial glow across the patio. I was still near the coat check window, the gift box unmoved on my lap like it carried something no one wanted. That's when I saw Tammy Ridgway, one of Carla's bridesmaids, tanned, bleached, and filtered to perfection. She stood across the courtyard, phone tilted in my direction, voice low and mocking. "Country girl returns, minus the glow-up," she whispered into the mic, fake laugh and all. Carmen and Wendy leaned in, their smirks sharp, eyes locked on the screen. "Zoom in on those shoes," Carmen said. "They're crying for mercy," Wendy added. "What's in the box, apple butter? Is that still a thing?" No one tagged me, but I felt the buzzes. I wasn't a guest. I was content, and apparently tonight's main event. I didn't move. Then Charlene appeared, wineglass in hand, face set in a version of concern that didn't fit her. She crouched beside me like I was something fragile. "Hey, Mabe," she said, soft. She only used that name when she wanted to sound nice. "I didn't know you'd come," she added. "You know how these people are. They see everything." Then lower. "I just didn't want drama. You know how you get." "How I get." She glanced at the box on my lap, fingertips brushing the twine like it might stain her. "Did you make this?" No warmth, no insult, just quiet judgment, neatly wrapped. I looked her straight in the eye. "You didn't want me here, but you didn't expect Travis to invite me himself." Her face flickered. She stood up fast, smoothed her dress. "We all move on in our own way." The music shifted, strings playing something slow and syrupy, and with it came a memory I thought I'd buried. Freshman year, I'd applied for the Stinton Fellowship, worked for weeks on the essay. When Charlene called me screaming with excitement, I thought it was good news. "They loved my essay," she said. "Can you believe it?" When she sent it for me to read, I froze. It was mine. Same images, same lines, word for word, but with her name on top. I said nothing. I thought silence was dignity. Not anymore. Back in the courtyard, I stood. Tammy had her phone up. Instagram Live. I caught her gaze just long enough to make her flinch. I didn't wave, didn't smile, just walked past the lens like it wasn't even there. That alone seemed to rattle them. Behind me, someone whispered, "Who does she think she is?" I didn't look back. But I knew the answer. You'll find out. By the time the rehearsal dinner officially began, most guests had filtered inside. Laughter spilled from the grand ballroom, refined, excessive, hollow. I stayed outside longer than I should have, letting the humid air settle around me like armor. Eventually, I walked the outer path along the hedges toward the back terrace. That's when I saw the seating chart. It was mounted on an oversized canvas, written in gold calligraphy so ornate it almost dared you to squint. I scanned the rows. Table 1, reserved for family. Table 2, Travis's colleagues. Table 3, fashion influencers. On and on it went, florid names scrolled like trophies. No Mabel. There was a single slot at table 6 labeled TBD. Not even a courtesy placeholder, just an empty chair and an afterthought. I didn't walk inside to ask. I didn't need confirmation. This exclusion had been premeditated, just like the invite, just like everything else Charlene ever orchestrated when control was in play. It reminded me of something else, another list I was erased from. Years ago. I was 26. Mom had just passed, and we were still numb when the family gathered at Charlene's brownstone in Atlanta. Everyone was drinking Pinot and pretending grief was a fashion show. At some point, Charlene pulled me aside to the kitchen, the same calm cruelty in her tone she used tonight. "You know, Mabe, you shouldn't expect much. I mean, you lived your own life. You were never really part of the family plan." She didn't say, "You don't belong," but she didn't have to. Weeks later, the lawyer read Mom's will. The house. The savings. Even the vintage diamond brooch she used to say would be mine. Gone. All left to Charlene. I didn't fight it. I didn't protest. I packed my bag that afternoon and caught a red-eye back to Austin. I rebuilt in silence. No drama, no spectacle. Just me, and the clarity that blood ties don't guarantee decency. Now, as I stood outside the ballroom, the memory didn't sting like it used to. It just felt like a caution sign I'd finally learned to obey. I leaned against the garden rail, peering through the arched windows. Inside, Charlene was raising a flute of champagne. Carla was on stage, laughing too loudly at something someone richer had just whispered. It was all choreography, every gesture part of a brand. But I didn't feel jealous. Not anymore. I felt solid. People had stolen from me before, time, recognition, legacy, but they'd never taken my core. I let them win back then, because I thought walking away made me noble. Now I knew better. I glanced at my phone. A new alert blinked across the top, severe thunderstorm warning for the morning. A laugh escaped before I could stop it. Let it rain. As the wind picked up and cicadas buzzed beneath the glow of garden lights, I moved toward the entrance. Guests were already taking their seats inside, clinking glasses, servers floating like dancers. I stepped into the path leading up to the ballroom, gift still cradled in my arm, posture straight. I didn't feel like a threat. I didn't even feel like a guest anymore, but someone else clearly thought otherwise. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice stopped me short. Marcia, again. This time, she didn't even attempt a smile. "I'm sorry, but your name still isn't on the list. We can't let unregistered guests pass this point." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the envelope. It was the same one Travis's office had mailed. Cream with gold foil, sealed twice. "This was sent directly from the groom's company," I said calmly. "She didn't touch it. I understand, but we were given very clear directives." As if on cue, Janice appeared from the side hall, tablet in hand, and attitude sharpened like a blade. "Mabel Hembry?" she asked, barely looking up. I nodded once. "I'm going to be honest with you," she said in that saccharine firm planner voice. "We received a private request earlier this week. asking that your place at dinner be withdrawn. The seating chart was finalized last night. We weren't told to expect you. I looked directly at her. Let me guess. Private, meaning not from Travis. She didn't answer. Charlene had been busy. You're drawing attention, Janice added, glancing behind me at the couple pausing to watch. I met her stare without blinking. Not as much as you think. She didn't respond. Just tilted her head at the two security guards who had quietly flanked the corridor. They weren't aggressive, just there. A wall with matching ties. May we escort you back to the outer gate? One asked. I looked past them into the ballroom. The chandeliers sparkled like someone had thrown 1,000 diamonds into the air and frozen them mid-fall. Charlene was laughing beside Carla, her hand on the bride's arm like she owned the place. I could have shouted something then, called her out, shattered the illusion. But that would have given her exactly what she wanted, a scene. Instead, I nodded at the guards. Lead the way. As we walked, I heard the murmurs grow louder. Who is she? Was that her sister? Is she crashing? The phones came out again, subtle and shameless. But I kept walking, one foot then the next, chin high, shoulders even, no tears, no tremble. Outside, the air was thicker than earlier. Storm on the horizon, maybe. I stopped just before the outer gate, turned slightly toward Janice, who was watching from the portico. You should bill the bride for this, I called. The cost of what you just allowed won't show up on your balance sheet tonight. But tomorrow? That'll be a different story. I stepped to the welcome table and gently placed the box down. Still wrapped. Still beautiful. Still mine. The twine bow hadn't moved. I turned from the welcome table and started walking toward the front gates. The estate lights cast long shadows across the gravel, and the air carried that pre-storm buzz, like everything around me was holding its breath. My heels scraped lightly on the stone as I reached into my purse to call a ride. Mabel! The voice hit harder than I expected. I paused. Travis Burkhead was jogging across the lawn in a tailored tuxedo, tie askew, hair slightly damp with sweat. His face looked like he hadn't blinked in minutes. I didn't know you were here, he said breathlessly, slowing to a stop. Why didn't anyone tell me? I held his gaze for a moment. Maybe ask the bride and my sister. He ran a hand down his jaw, visibly shaken. You weren't on the list. They said you declined. I never got the invitation. It was sent to my childhood home. Intentionally. His eyes widened. I swear, Mabel, I had no idea. I let the silence settle. Then he said it. What should have been said years ago. You gave me everything when I had nothing. He looked down, almost ashamed. 7 years ago, when nobody would touch me, you sent me a $15,000 check. I didn't even ask. You just believed. You didn't owe me anything, I said, my voice steady. I owe you everything, he corrected, louder now. There's no cloud crown, no IPO, no wedding, nothing, without that start. His voice cracked slightly as the ballroom doors opened behind us. Light and music spilled out. People turned. Some already had their phones up, filming. Travis didn't lower his voice. She's the reason I'm standing here, he said, gesturing toward me. Not the investors, not Carla, her. Someone near the door gasped. Carla stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still on a glass of wine, her expression sliding into panic. I didn't move. But inside, something shifted. Charlene appeared next. She stormed down the steps toward us, face flushed with something between fury and fear. Travis, this isn't the time, she hissed, grabbing his elbow. People are watching. You're embarrassing Carla. You want to talk about embarrassment? I said quietly, turning toward her for the first time that night. Try being erased from your own bloodline. Charlene's hand flinched off Travis. You're making a scene, she snapped. Then let the scene begin, I replied. You started it. Travis didn't move. He just stood beside me, eyes forward, no apology in sight. After a few tense seconds of Charlene frozen in place, Travis leaned over and said quietly, Come with me, just out back. I think you need a breather. We cut through the hedged path around the ballroom and slipped onto the side terrace. Soft jazz floated from overhead speakers. A few guests were out here nursing drinks or sneaking cigarettes, too polite to stare. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But then, another voice cut in. Mabel? I turned, stunned. There she was, Olivia Ray. We hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years, not since the final time she visited my old place in Austin. She was now with Vero Capital, a name I'd seen tagged in Carla's LinkedIn brag posts. "What are you doing here?" she asked, eyes wide. "Wait, are you her Mabel?" I nodded slowly, uncertain. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I had no idea you were connected to all this. I thought you were off the grid." My spine straightened. "Not off the grid, just quiet." Then Olivia's voice dropped even lower. "You know that pitch Carla's been flaunting? This whole Revive brand she built a few years ago?" My silence said enough. "It's yours," she said. "Or at least, it was. Remember that campus hackathon, 2016? You showed us that blueprint over tacos." My pulse kicked. I remembered. The layered wellness app model. My model. I'd shared it casually during a study break, never thinking it'd leave the table. "She pitched it 2 years later as her own," Olivia added. "Filed the trademark. I pushed back, but they made me sign an NDA when they hired me. It's been eating me alive ever since." I blinked, absorbing it in waves. Travis had drifted to the terrace edge, giving us space. He didn't need to hear to understand. I felt it in my chest. Clicks locking into place. Quiet thefts. Branded lies. But this time, I had a witness. "No more letting things slide just because they sparkle," I murmured. Inside, I could hear Carla's voice over a mic. Her toast had started. The grand finale. I looked at Olivia. "Can you walk with me?" She nodded without question. We stepped into the ballroom just as Carla raised her glass. I walked calmly to the front, heels quiet on velvet. She saw me. Her smile faltered. I didn't grab the mic. Didn't need to. I handed her an envelope. Sealed. Simple. "You'll want your lawyer to read that before Monday," I said, then turned toward the crowd. They didn't understand yet, but they would. Carla clutched the envelope like it burned. Her smile was gone, and in its place sat something I'd never seen on her face before. Uncertainty. The ballroom hushed. The clinking stopped. Even the waitstaff paused mid-step. All that remained was the sound of the air conditioning and the weight of eyes. One of the journalists from the media table, a guy in horn-rimmed glasses and a blazer far too casual for this crowd, stood. "Is it true?" he asked, voice cutting clean through the tension. "Did Revive steal a wellness patent?" Gasps followed like dominoes. Carla opened her mouth, then closed it again. Travis didn't wait. He stepped forward, his voice louder than I'd ever heard it. "Mabel is the reason this company, this entire night, exists. I didn't build it alone. None of us did. And some of you," he scanned the crowd, "owe her far more than silence." I didn't flinch. I looked straight at Charlene, whose wineglass was now trembling just slightly in her hand. "You judged what I wore," I said, calm and clear, "what I brought, where I sat. But never once did any of you ask who I was." That's when the screen behind the stage blinked, flickered, then lit up. Photos rolled across it. A school library ribbon cutting, a rural clinic opening, a headline from Forbes, the anonymous investor behind 3 rising Fortune 100 techs. A quiet wave of awe moved through the room. Ruben must have triggered it remotely. It was the truth, just without glitter. I wasn't trying to steal their spotlight. I was correcting the credits. But even as they watched, my mind drifted back, not to a boardroom but a cafeteria in Kentucky. I was 16. I'd won the state science fair, first place. For once I'd felt worthy. But backstage, my mother had pulled me aside. "Let Charlene accept the award," she'd said softly. "She needs this more than you. You'll be fine." That was the first time I learned to disappear for someone else's comfort. Now, I was done fading. As murmurs spread, Carla stepped back, bumping the mic. Charlene moved forward, ever the fixer. This is getting out of hand," she muttered, shaking her head. "Mabel, this isn't about you." I turned steady and unblinking. "That's the only thing you've ever said that's true," I replied. Guests shifted, a few left. One woman whispered, "She's the real one." I didn't chase applause. I never had. But I wasn't walking out this time. Tomorrow, no one will know their brand. But they'll know my name. Carla tried to recover. She laughed, a high, glassy sound that fell flat against the silence. "I think we've all had enough drama for one night," she said, voice tight. From the back of the room, someone started clapping. Slowly. Then came another, and another. But it wasn't for Carla. The applause wasn't celebration. It was mockery. A few people chuckled. Then the sound swelled into laughter, not joyful, but brutal. Carla's smile cracked. I could see the muscles twitch in her cheek as her public image buckled. One man near the doors muttered, "That's what happens when your empire's built on Instagram filters and borrowed brilliance." Phones lit up again. Sponsors left mid-meal. A champagne flute hit the floor near table 9 and shattered, but no one turned to look. They were all watching her crumble. Charlene, always the cleaner, surged forward and grabbed the mic. "Let's remember what this is," she said quickly. "A celebration of love. This night wasn't meant to—" I stepped closer. "You don't get to tell this story anymore," I said. "Not here. Not now." She froze. "You call this love?" I asked, sweeping a glance over the scattered crowd. "Then maybe you've never really seen it." Silence returned, this time carved out of discomfort. Janice, the planner, walked up to the platform. Her voice was steady, like someone used to extinguishing fires, but this one she didn't try to save. "I've organized over 200 weddings," she said. "This isn't love. This is ego, performance, spin." She turned to Carla. "As of this moment, we're terminating our service contract. Your brand is no longer in alignment with our values." There were actual gasps now. Carla's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but no words came. Charlene snapped at Janice. "You can't just walk out mid-event." But Janice wasn't listening. She handed her headset to an assistant and walked straight out the doors. Carla stepped down, heels shaking, face ashen. Charlene followed in her wake, whispering something angry that got drowned by murmurs. Then Ruben's name appeared on the projection screen. A pre-written message blinked in clean Helvetica across the display. Mabel Hembry is co-founder, lead investor, and the logistical partner responsible for tonight's venue. Any inquiries may be directed to her office. That was it. Just facts. Truth didn't need drama to land. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just stood still as the world reset around me. They didn't invite me. But I showed up. And now, I'm staying. The ballroom lights dimmed behind me as I stepped into the humid night. A breeze rolled off the water, carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. I didn't rush. There was no reason to. The valet line was shorter now. Most of the guests had already fled, some red-faced, some recording, all pretending they hadn't seen what they saw. Travis caught up to me just before I reached the curb. His tie hung loose, jacket unbuttoned, hair mussed like he'd run a marathon in his own life. "I wish it had been you beside me tonight," he said, voice low. I looked at him, not with anger, but with finality. "It still can be. Just not here. Not like this." He nodded, then stepped back into the glow of the porch lights without another word. The driver opened the car door, but I turned to glance back once, not at the people, not at the building, but at what I'd reclaimed. At Charleston Airport, the news screens were already cycling headlines. "Influencer's wedding implodes amid lawsuit and fraud allegations." "PR exec Charlene Garlow removed from ethics committee following scandal." "The woman behind the curtain, Mabel Hembry and the quiet rise." I didn't need to read them. I knew. No one called me. Not Charlene, not Carla. But I didn't expect them to. That kind of silence? It was familiar now. Somewhere over Louisiana, I listened to a voicemail from Ruben. "You stood tall, May," he said. "Quiet power shifts the loudest rooms. Come home." When I arrived in Austin, the sun was barely rising. The city still slept. I dropped my bag inside the doorway and walked straight to the quilt box. The one I'd carried across states for a moment that never came. Carefully, I peeled back the wrap. Inside was a story, stitched from pieces of shirts I'd worn during my first fundraise, a strip from Mom's apron, a faded patch sewn with my company's first logo. In the center, tucked tight, was a piece of an old field jacket Dad wore the year he passed. I draped it across the armchair by the window. It belonged there. I didn't seek revenge. This was reclamation. Even after all that happened, I didn't walk away seeking revenge. What I wanted was clarity, to reclaim what was mine, and to show anyone out there who's been told they weren't enough. You are. You don't have to wear labels or shout to prove your worth. Sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the loudest truth. Family doesn't always mean fairness, and blood doesn't always equal loyalty. But healing? That's personal. And it begins the moment you stop asking for permission to exist fully. So, if you've ever been laughed at, dismissed, or pushed to the side, I hope you remember this. You don't need an invitation to take up space. Sometimes the most powerful move is showing up, unapologetically. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? Did you ever prove them wrong? Or are you still waiting for your moment? Let me know in the comments. If this story hit home for you, drop a 1 in the chat or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like this video, that's okay too. Just let me know why and where you watched it from. We grow through honest stories and real talk. Want more stories that speak truth and healing? Hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. Because I promise you, the next story might just be yours.